I was sitting in a car in front of the ballet studio because I was interviewing a former White House cabinet official. And all of a sudden I see the number for the pediatrician pop up. Now, what am I going to do? Because as every parent in the world knows, if you don't take that call in that moment from the pediatrician disappears. I was like, I have to know if my daughter is okay. And I said, I can't lie, I can't do this. So what do I do? I said, okay, third ring. I said, that's a really great point you just made. And it reminds me, what do you think? In mid-sentence, I hang up on her. And I take the pediatrician's call. Now, she's calling me back because nobody hangs up on a former White House cabinet official.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessie Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing all of us. When we talk about parenting on the show, often we talk about moms and work, and there's a good reason for that. Everyone knows that so many women carry so much of the invisible labor and the emotional labor of a household, but that's not the whole story. Today's episode is really something special. It's a conversation I've been wanting to have for a very long time. We're going to talk about fatherhood, and specifically, we're going to talk about what it means to be a lead father in a household. A man who is leaning into the work of caregiving. Now, this episode gives us an opportunity to talk about so many things that I personally am curious to explore, like identity and ambition, masculinity, partnership. What does it mean to be a father today? What does it mean to be a lead parent? Our guest is Paul Sullivan, and I've known Paul for a long time. Back when he wrote the Wealth Matters column at the New York Times, I was a new journalist just getting into the biz. So about a dozen years ago, Paul's wife, she works in finance, she got this great opportunity to start a company. Paul and his wife talked about it, and they decided that if she was going to chase this dream, it was going to be all-consuming. And so he would step up and play the lead parent role. You know what I'm talking about here? He would make sure the kids got to the pediatrician, that they had their school lunch when they left in the morning. He'd be on it. Now, this was a deliberate decision that they made, but for a long time, he still kind of kept it on the DL. He didn't want the folks at the New York Times to know and maybe withhold opportunities from him because they worried he couldn't do it all. He didn't make a big deal about it at carpool when he dropped off and all of the moms seemed to be in on information that he didn't have. He just figured it out. But then came 2020. The pandemic brought everything that it brought to those of us trying to keep our kids afloat while also keeping our job going. He was suddenly a full-time school teacher, writing, meeting deadlines, and it was hard. And he looked where many of us looked for support, right? The internet. And he found plenty of support for mothers. But there sure wasn't a lot out there for dads. And so in 2022, he started a company. It's called the Company of Dads. It's a media company and a community, and his goal really is to create resources and opportunities for connection for the many, many men who are increasingly stepping into this lead caregiver role. Today, Paul joins me to talk about what it is like to take on that caregiving identity. We're going to talk about ambition in masculinity, and we're going to talk about how to make work work for men, for women, and for all families. Here's Paul.
I was very fortunate because it was night and day. Whereas some people, the career complexity builds gradually and more responsibility, you get promoted, and suddenly you have a lot more responsibility than you imagine. For me, my dream had been to be at the New York Times, and it worked out. You know, when the second daughter was born, I'd already sold my second book. I mean, my career was way better than I ever imagined. I grew up lower middle class in Western Massachusetts. So I'm like, this is incredible. But it was really that night or day between my wife said, I'm going to start my own firm. And my wife said, I'm going to be so busy, going forward. And I said, I'll do it. I'll step in. I'll become the lead dad. And it worked because by that point, with books, with the New York Times, with speaking opportunities with kids, I had a good deal of control over my time. I could control about 80% of my time. If I was still like, when I started out as a reporter and I was covering XYZ and suddenly something happened on a Saturday night and I'd have to run and do it, it wouldn't have worked. Right. It was having that ability to control my own time. And that desire to be a super involved dad and, love for my wife. And I thought, you're going to do great at this, that allowed it all to come together.
Okay, so I want to talk about two pieces of that.
Uh-huh.
First of all, I want to talk about your own career at that point. You kept working, right? You stepped into this role.
Stuff. I kept doing more and more stuff. Yeah.
But you kept the foot on the gas for your career.
100%.
I want to talk about like how the early parent management stuff went. Drop-offs, relationships with people at school. Like, how does school work? Because I'll tell you, in my family, we have a parent call list for my daughter's school, right? And it has column 1 is parent A and column 2 is parent B, because nobody's going to write mom and dad on those two columns, but what they mean is mom and dad. And so then the birthday party invitations, they only go to parent A,
That's
right? So how did that whole sort of informal system of power work when you were in that role?
It did not go smoothly. And so when I started off, I talk about this a lot. Yeah. I was an undercover lead dad. Like I didn't, I was in there, I was in these moments, and they knew, the other moms and dads, they knew I was involved. And the ones that knew how involved I was, they would, send the birthday invites to me. The school would call me if something was going on. But those who didn't know, they defaulted to my wife. And worse, somebody's filling in at the school and there's something wrong with my daughter, and they'll call my wife and she's in Edinburgh. And they're calling her and they're like, you need to go and do this. Phoebe has just fallen. She's bleeding everywhere. And my wife would say, well, I'm in Edinburgh. There's nothing I can do about it. If you look on your list, parent A is my husband, who is likely 10 to 15 minutes away. You should call him. So it was almost a training process for all these people in our community. And once they learn that, at this point now, most of my daughter's friends, the moms or the dads, I'll be on the text chain, I'll be on the email chain to get stuff done. But it didn't happen overnight.
So I'm curious, as your wife's career grew more established and she had more flexibility too, was there a little bit more of a share of responsibilities and roles back and forth? Or did you always continue to be the established lead dad?
Yeah, I'd say from 2013 to 2020, my wife had an office in the city. We live in Connecticut. She would go into the city, 4 days a week because that's what she was supposed to do. She was the boss, but she was a tough boss on herself. So it wasn't, and at the same time, I wasn't ever going to raise my hand and tell my editors at the Times that I was the lead dad. And that's not because I don't think I had great editors, many of whom were working moms. I don't think they would have cared. But that was my own insecurity. If back then, my wife Laura, working in asset management, if she had been working out in Connecticut, if she had been working remotely, people would have been like, where's your office? It's how quickly COVID changed our perceptions. But back then, I think we're both, living these undercover lives for something that, was actually really wonderful.
So during this period, you didn't disclose to the people in your office, hey, by the way, I'm on call here. I'm the lead.
Oh no! I remember taking calls from editors in the supermarket, and I would take my kids. I'm like, okay, we got this, and I got to take this. This is Phyllis is calling. Oh, we all know Phyllis. It's like Phyllis is calling. Like when Phyllis calls, and they're like, okay, But there were funny moments because this doesn't always. You can't stage manage everything. And I remember this time, probably 2017, 2018. And I'm sitting in front of a ballet studio. One of my daughters is in ballet, and the other daughter has some sort of infection. And my dad, known as Grampy, has taken her to the pediatrician. Now, the Grampy is wonderful, but the rule with Grampy is don't talk to anybody. Like, don't talk to the doctor. Don't tell the doctor stories. Don't tell the doctor how you once were a great sailor. Don't do anything like that. Just when you're in with the doctor, call me, and I will talk to the doctor. But here's the problem. I was sitting in a car in front of the ballet studio because I was interviewing a former White House cabinet official. This person, as you know, takes forever to get a former White House cabinet official on the phone. And I'm talking to her, and she's great. Now, I know she has 2 kids, but I'm not going to do this. And all of a sudden, I see the number for the pediatrician pop up. Now, what am I going to do? Because as every parent in the world knows, if you don't take that call in that moment from the pediatrician disappears. I don't know where they go. I don't know what they do. Gone. You call back in a minute. Gone. I'm sorry, Dr. So-and-so is gone. And the next time they call, they're going to interrupt something else. I was like, I have to know if my daughter is okay. And I said, well, but I can't lie. I can't do this. So what do I do? It's okay. 3rd ring. I said, that's a really great point you just made. And it reminds me, what do you think? And mid-sentence, I hang up on her. I hang up on her and I take the pediatrician's call. Now, I talk to the pediatrician. Now, she's calling me back because nobody hangs up on a former White House cabinet official, former head of the Council of Economic Advisors. This person has not been hung up on in 30 years, and she is calling me back. I'm like, sweating out. So finally, talk to the pediatrician, get everything. Calls me. I answer the phone. Now, what am I going to say? I can't lie to her. I'm a New York Times columnist. I have to tell the truth. So I said, you know what? I'm really sorry that happened. The cell phone reception in my town is awful. Where were we? That's really all true. I was really sorry that the pediatrician called in that moment. If I had been driving around my town, it has notoriously bad cell phone service. And let's just pick up where we're at. Now, today, what would happen if that? Today, we see kids behind us in our Zoom calls all the time. But today, we'd say, excuse me 1 second. My child is here. Let me just see what's going on here. And we deal with it. That's how much the world of work and life has changed, in 5 or 6 years.
And I think so much about the conversations working moms have about all the ways in which they feel that it is just understood that they will carry the emotional labor of understanding all of that in the back of their mind while they pursue like wildly ambitious careers. The complaint that they sometimes have that their partners don't even know or appreciate or understand it. And I'm just very curious to your perspective on that.
Yeah. We talk a lot about this. And we say, if you buy a couch, okay, you buy a brand new couch, you put it down in your house, and this couch is awesome, super comfortable. All 4 of you sit on the couch, you watch your Netflix show, you're happy. Year after year, what happens? The couch gets some stains on it, stuff gets buried underneath the couch. And then one day you either move or you buy a new couch. And when you lift up that couch and you see what is underneath that couch, and you're like, I cannot believe I've been sitting on top of that stuff for all these years. That's disgusting. Dust bunnies, Skittles, dog treats, things that have decayed into some unknown form. That's resentment. That's the resentment that builds up in a relationship. As I say, dating is an exercise in failure. At one point, you find somebody that you believe you want to go further with. You get married, you form a partnership, what have you. Then you think, boy, I really do like this person. Okay, let's have some kids. You have 1 kid, 2 kids, however many kids you have. Nobody would start off and say, you know what? I think I'm going to find a lazy sociopath who's really not going to help me at all. That's not anybody's plan for future happiness. But it's what happens because we stop communicating. And why do we stop communicating? Because when you do 1 thing, when you do 2 things, when you do 5 things, you can do that. But what happens is you build up over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you're not doing 2 or 3 extra things. You're doing 20 extra things. You're doing 25 extra things. So one of the things we do at the company of dads is we bring couples together. They can download it off our website. It's free. And we call it the paper test. And it's super simple. Couldn't even morally even charge for it, but it's so super simple. But it brings couples together. And what is it? It's essentially a piece of paper. You find a Saturday or Sunday, nobody's angry, have a cup of tea, have a glass of wine, whatever you like. Spouse 1 writes down everything that they think they do in the relationship, and then everything they think that spouse 2 does in the relationship. And then vice versa. And you compare. And the one thing we guarantee 100% of the time is there is no way those lists will match. But what happens afterwards is that leads to, hopefully, a fruitful conversation, because people will say, well, wait a second, I do this and this. Like, no, you don't. Well, I do 80% of it. Well, doing 80% of something, you might as well do 0 of it, because somebody has to do the other 20%, or have to remind you to do the 80%. And it starts to lead to the type of conversations that you were able to have when you were just a couple, or when you only had, 1 child, when you had a lot more, discretionary time. Yeah. And it helps with that reset. It helps clean out all the stuff that's under that couch, all that resentment that's built up year after year.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not the fact of the chores, it is how the chores are executed, and like a controlling sense over how they should be executed.
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. And I think if somebody wants to fold my fitted sheet, however they fold it, however they, jam it into the sheet closet, I'm fine with that. If you want somebody to own something, you can't then redo it. You can't micromanage. You think about it at work. At work, you wouldn't do this. At work, you'd be the worst manager ever if you said, hey, okay, can you do these 3 things? And the person does those 3 things. You're like, huh, okay. And then you redo the 3 things. You don't want to be that person in the home. You want people to own that task. And if they own it and they're doing it to the best of their ability, that's fine. Same thing goes with parenting. Parents are going to parent differently. Mom is going to do things one way. Dad's going to do things another way. Grandparents come in, they're going to do things another way. Like at the end of the day, is the child safe? Is the child happy? Is the child engaged? Then it's fine.
Yeah.
Let them do it.
Well, and in parenting, you need management to be on the same page, right?
Or else labor
Parents are
revolts.
like,
If
yeah.
management is not on the same page, labor, i.e. the children, they revolt and they're fierce.
So tell us about how you came to start the Company of Dads.
So as I said, like being an undercover lead dad, I was able to make all of it work in my community, at the Times, doing books and everything, because my kids were in school. My kids were at summer camp, and if they weren't in school or at summer camp, we could come up with a plan. Maybe we took a vacation as a family. Maybe we brought in some high school or college kids to do the babysitting, and it went fine. COVID happens. I'm as busy as anybody can possibly be at the New York Times. We're all coming together like it's 2008 all over again. My wife in asset management, she's even busier because she's worried, is this 2008 all over again in the bad way? Is what I've built, is this going to be sustainable? What's going to happen? 2021 ends up being her best year up until that point, but you don't know that. You don't know that in the moment. And we are, 3 people trying to figure out, Zoom school. And I started to feel, really alone. And I started to think like, I need some support here. And, my grandfather, he was a key figure in my life, worked in the post office, taught me how to play golf when I was 10. And it's important because there are a million ways that you can nerd out online about golf or any hobby. You can nerd out in so many different ways. So I said, I will go. Surely there's got to be something for lead dads online. And I started Googling around, and what is it? There's tons of stuff for moms. Okay, I'm not a mom. That's not going to cut it. I'll go to the parenting sites. Well, guess what? All the parenting sites, they're really written for moms. So then I think, okay, what is there for dads? It's all dads in some form of distress. They've been incarcerated. They drink too much. They do drugs. They're divorced. They have bad relationships with their daughters. All these Ds, like these dismal Ds. And I thought, this is super important. I'm glad these things exist. But I want something positive. I want something where I can talk to other dads who are in my position. And so I was like, well, it is a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just suck it up. I mean, this isn't good for anybody, but let me see if I can quantify this. Like, what would a journalist do? You say like, okay, I have this idea, but maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it's not real. So I went again, U.S. Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Pew. Very quickly, I was able to triangulate and come up with this number of dads. There's 25 million dads in the U.S. who are lead dads or could be lead dads. There are a lot of dads who are stepping up into this role. And it wasn't too hard to find out that a lot of guys in their 30s were really pushing this.
I want to really understand who these lead dads are. Okay, so go through the categories here.
So there are 4 categories. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are, only about 2 to 3 million dads in the United States are what people would call stay-at-home dads. We call them lead dads who devote all their time to their families. We don't use the term stay-at-home. Okay, that's only 2 to 3 million. 46% of married heterosexual couples, the wife earned as much or more than her husband. That's a ripe demographic for lead dads because you need support around all the household chores. 18% of fathers in the United States are divorced, widowed, or otherwise single. So they are, by definition, lead dads 50% of the time or more. And the one group that we never were able to get good data on is married gay dads. And we know anecdotally they're about 4 to 5% of the dads who are in the company of dads. But that was a big number, and it was a diverse group, and it was all across, demographics. So I thought, how can I, as a journalist, okay, I've got some data. How can I tell a story? Is there a story to tell around this? And I knew that men would lie to me. Because if somebody had come up to me in my town or on the train and said, hey, Paul, are you a lead dad? I was like, what are you talking about? I'm a New York Times columnist. Maybe you've read my book. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I went to senior female executives who had kids. And I said, what do you think of this idea? And they fell into 3 buckets. One said, that's awesome. My husband is doing that. He's been great all along, but his friends make fun of him. His friends call him Mr. Mom. They call him a house husband. They say, what are you, retired? But he doesn't care. He does it. We've got a great partnership. He does XYZ for work, but, he really is supportive here. Second group, a little bit younger, they said, love my husband. We had a great time when we first met. Had a great time when we had kids, but he doesn't do anything at home. And he thinks he does all these things. And COVID is showing me that he's like playing Xbox, and I'm out here like trying to take care of the kids. This is not tenable. Like, you need a lead dad boot camp. I said, okay. And then the third group was women whose husbands could never get on board. and they got divorced. And they said, I wish this existed before. My husband never felt supported. He didn't really help out, have at it. And it was like the mixture of the data and, these stories. And I'm telling my wife, I said, I think this might be another book. And she said, I think it's more than that.
And the Company of Dads is, to be clear, it is a media company, right?
3 things. It's a media company. It's a community platform, and then we do workplace education. So we have partnership with companies like Bright Horizons or Saramount. We do one-off things in financial services and consulting with some healthcare companies. Everything we do is framed in caregiving. And what we're trying to do is help families fulfill their full potential. It's not helping dads, not helping moms, it's helping families. And when you look at that non-birthing parent, that person who's also eligible for some amount of parental leave, how that is messaged to that person is essential. What has happened? Like, let's just say it's a mom and a dad for this example. Mom starts to show, 7, 8 months pregnant. Oh, okay, I understand. She's going to go off on parental leave. The father comes and says, well, I'm going to take leave as well. And he says, I'm going to take leave. I want to be there. I want to support my wife. I want to be part of this. And he's entitled to that leave. Let's say he works for a company where there's 20 weeks of paid leave for dads, 20 weeks paid leave for birthing parents. There's a tech company that we talked to, and they came to me and they said, we give this real example, 20 weeks equally, but we've noticed that the non-birthing parents only take on average 12.4 weeks. We are thinking of reducing our leave to 12.4 weeks. And I said, you're a data-driven company, aren't you? And they said, yes, your data's everything. I said, okay. Let me point something out to you. Why do you know why they're taking 12.4 weeks? No, they're taking less. They don't want it. I said, do you have any data that supports that they don't want it? I said, no. I said, I'll argue that the reason they're taking 12.4 weeks and not 20 weeks is they don't feel supported by managers at work. They feel that because they're the non-birthing parent, if they take that time off, they're somehow going to take a step back. And that's kind of eye-opening. And then we take it the next level to companies and say, look, if you want to promote people equitably, are you going to promote the people who are just in the office all the time? Or are you going to promote the people who are actually doing the best job? And they'll say, what do you mean? I said, well, I have 3 kids. Let's say my wife took 20 weeks with each child. That's 60 weeks. I'm really good at simple math. I only took a week. That's 3. There's a difference of 57 weeks. Let's spread that across the entire company. I would be people like me, dads who only take 1 week, which is not true, but just for this example, it is. Dads who only take 1 week versus birthing parents, moms have to take 20 weeks. I'm going to be more present. And because I'm more present, you're going to see me more. Am I the best person for that promotion? I don't know. But I shouldn't receive that promotion just because I'm there more often because I can be physically present.
That is so interesting. Thinking about centering a company around caregiving and thinking about putting dads in the title goes against much of what I think of when I think of the definition of caregiving. We have in our culture in this moment equated femininity and caregiving. And our ideas about masculinity, they're at best incredibly amorphous. And I struggle a lot with this raising a son. I know a lot of our listeners do. I go looking for great role models for my daughter. They're everywhere. I walk into Target to buy a girl power t-shirt and I have 17 flavors to choose from. I would never go over to the boys section and look for the boy power t-shirt. If I did, it definitely would not be there. And I would know better than to buy it if it were.
Yeah.
Where do you see great images of masculinity that broaden our mind?
There's a company called Heart and Home, and they make caregiving toys for little boys, so that if a little boy wants to have a stroller, they can do that. There's a company called Maple that helps people organize their whole lives. It's started by a dad, so it comes from a dad's perspective. I think you see a lot of caregiving, positive caregiving images around boys, young boys, teenage boys, at least where I am in the suburbs, where babysitting, you want more and more boys. Like when I was a kid, there were no boy babysitters. Like it wasn't a job that was open to me. Now these boys are so smart. They're like, wait a second, I can go play soccer with this little boy. I can go play lacrosse with this kid. I can go play Xbox with that kid, and somebody's going to pay me $20 an hour.
Some good flexible money right there.
Yeah, good flexible money, and they're on it.
Well, so you've really put yourself in the center of this conversation. What are the kinds of things that you hear from other lead dads?
So all the guys who are coming to me, they are so happy that this exists, and they'll start saying, I am a lead dad. And this one guy, his wife has a very senior role at Goldman Sachs, and he has been waving the flag that he is a lead dad because he's a musician. He manages some real estate for the family. But up until this point, he would go to these parties with his super senior wife who works at Goldman Sachs, and he wouldn't know what to say. Because if he said he was, I have these things that I do, but I really, I'm the go-to parent, I'm taking care of my kids, people would think less of him. So if he says, I'm a lead dad and I manage my family's real estate portfolio, people are fine with it. And so having this language has become empowering. When you explain it to men, sometimes these guys, I'll have a conversation with them. I can think of so many, and they'll say, because we have this feature every week called the Lead Dad of the Week, and it does really well on LinkedIn, and it's out there. And they'll say, I love what you're doing, but I don't really want to talk publicly about my role. And I said, I'm sorry, you don't want to be a lead dad of the week. I had one guy, it was so absurd. He took his wife's name when they got married. His wife recommended that I talk to her husband because she's like, he is a lead dad. He had just lost his job. And he said, can we talk about this in 6 months or so? And I said, sure, but why? He's like, well, I'm trying to get a new job, and I've been able to engineer being the lead dad, and I don't want the next company, whoever's going to hire me, I don't want them to know that I'm the lead dad of the week. They'll be able to search it up, they'll find it. And so that's, deeply problematic. We talk about 20 years ago, the discrimination that women would have felt going into the workplace. Like, I don't know, can we promote her? She may have a child one day.
But here's the thing that still exists.
Of
and what
course
you're describing is a universal experience. It is not particular to men. Right? And that is sort of the tragedy of caregiving in our culture. Well, so I got a final question for you.
Okay.
What do your daughters think about this title?
My middle daughter will go around, and she saw this interview with Dax Shepard, and she said, Dad, he's a lead dad. You should go talk to him. And so she has this lead dad radar. They've met a lot of the guys, and they'll come in on conversations, and they just fully embrace it. And I'll tell this story. One of the first things I did when I was trying to find guys for the podcast, trying to find guys who are lead dads of the week, I got introduced to this guy named Najee Good. Najee works in technology now, but Najee played 10 years in the NFL. He won a Super Bowl. He tackled some guy named Tom Brady. I don't know.
Heard of him.
I heard of him. But Najee is a lead dad to his 2 daughters, lives in Jacksonville, Florida. When we're down there, we hang out together. He's an awesome guy. I selected him not because he was an awesome guy, because he was a lead dad, but I also selected him because he was a former NFL player. He'd played 10 years in the league. He won a Super Bowl. NFL players are our definition of masculinity. I want to hold him up there but he's also an amazing caregiver. He has these 2 little girls. He's out there taking them to ballet. He's running with them. He's a super involved dad. And that's the image that we want, because that's positive and that's proactive. And you can see, like, you can be, masculine, and you can also be caring. And so, my daughters, back to the original question, like, my daughters are proud that I'm doing this. But, I've got a 15-year-old who's like, if I do anything wrong, if I don't do something for her, she'll say, well, that's not very lead dad of you, is it? I was like, no, it's not. No, go do this. But,
That's wonderful. That was Paul Sullivan, founder of the Company of Dads. You should totally check out his podcast and the website. And there's so much I'm taking from this conversation today. First off, communication is everything, and transparency is critical. I love Paul's example of the paper test. This way of figuring out what you believe you do at home, what your partner believes they do at home, and how you get the balance right. Another thing that I take away from this episode is this idea that you're going to need to teach people how to treat you. Challenging gender stereotypes is uncomfortable, not just in your home, but in the carpool line, at work, everywhere where you brush up against people who aren't accustomed to seeing someone like you do the things that you're doing. And finally, the Company of Dads is such a resource for caretakers, truly. I hope you'll share it with the caregivers in your life. There is an opportunity here for us to feel less isolated, for us to come together around something that matters so much and re-articulate how we value it. Paul is a real leader here, and he leads mostly by showing up. This week, in honor of Father's Day, that's right, happy Father's Day, we're going to talk about all of this on Office Hours. I hope you'll join us. That's me and our senior producer, Sarah Storm. We go live just as we always do every Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on the LinkedIn news page, or you can check the show notes for a link. I hope to see you there. And if this episode made you think at all, well, maybe you could share it. Send it via text, email, whatever you like, to a friend. Thanks for joining us in the Hello Monday studio today. I am Jessie Hempel, and I'll be right back here next week.